Mr. President, I request to be recognized as if in morning business for such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Thank you. You know, we don't hear that very often. I just heard the term from the senator from Nebraska. It's under budget and ahead of schedule. You did something right. Good for you. Last week, I've been asked several times in the last couple of 3 days where we are with what I consider to be the most significant bill of the year, every year, which is the defense authorization bill. And I've been having to give the same answer for the last 3 or 4 days. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's going to ultimately happen. Last week I came down here. I talked about why we needed to pass the National Defense Authorization Act and why a full year continuing resolution is totally unacceptable. It'd just be devastating to us. And I'm back here again because last week nothing's changed, and that's not okay. And the reason nothing's changed is because many of the members of the House are off someplace. I think they're in Afghanistan or someplace on a trip, and we were in the middle of negotiating. Let me just make sure we understand what we're talking about here. We've passed for 58 consecutive years the National Defense Authorization Bill. We haven't missed a year during that time, so we'll ultimately pass it. But we did, and I have to say, this is not a partisan statement that I'm making about this, because the Senate House and the Senate Democrats and Republicans did a good job. And I particularly want to thank Jack Reed. Jack Reed and I'm the chairman of the committee. He's the ranking member. We did ours in record time. We set a record actually a year ago. We did this in a time a shorter period of time than it's been done in 40 years. And we are anticipating doing that again. And so we did our bill in the Senate, and everything came out fine. We ended up passing it with only 2 votes in opposition to it. So there's no reason that we're not doing it right now. And the reason this is critical, if for some reason we didn't get this thing done until December, our kids over there would not be funded. I'm talking about payrolls, I'm talking about everything else. Our military would stop in its tracks. Now, it's not going to happen. And one reason we know it's not going to happen is because we passed the short bill version, and which upset everyone. That is taking everything out of the bill that has nothing to do with defense and just passing it. It's kind of in the weeds, it's kind of complicated, but nonetheless, we're going to end up getting it. But we need to get it, and you need to get it just in a matter of days now, as soon as the members of the committee in the House are back in town. Now, what kind of a message do my Democrat colleagues think they're sending our troops who lay their lives on the line every day if we don't prioritize their pay, their housing, their programs to care for their families while they're away? What kind of a message do the Democrat colleagues think that we are sending our allies and our partners, those who depend on us? And what kind of a message are we sending those who are not our allies? And this is the problem that we're having. And I say the Democrats in the House because it's not the Republicans in the House, and it's not the Democrats in the Senate. This is just the Democrats in the House. We passed our bill on a bipartisan way here in the Senate, and we just need to get this thing finished. It's the most important bill of the year. Now, they claim that they are not supporting our partners, that we are not supporting our partners in Syria. Then they turn around on a dime and refuse to authorize the very assistance that keeps our partners safe and effective in the fight against ISIS. And I'm concerned about the kind of message that our colleagues think they're sending our adversaries. Our adversaries, for them, they enjoy this dysfunction. That's what they want. They want defense funding mired in partisan debate. They don't want us to catch up. And if we don't take action now, partisan bickering over supporting our troops and investing in national security will become our Achilles heel. At the end of the day, all these challenges won't just go away because we want them to go away. They're out there. And to meet these challenges, our troops need equipment, they need training, they need weapons, and everything that's outlined in this blueprint. This, by the way, this is the blueprint, which is the National Defense Strategy. It's a National Defense Strategy Commission. This is put together by an equal number of Democrats and Republicans well over a year ago as to how do we want to handle this thing? How do we handle our national defense? What's our strategy going to be? The president adopted this, and it's a good strategy, and we have been following this on our committee to the letter. And so we have this Strategy Commission report. There's a quote from General Creighton Adams, a military leader from World War II on through Vietnam. His name sounds familiar because he was the one that the Adams tank was named after. He talked about how after World War II, the United States failed to properly modernize and train our military. And who paid for it? Our soldiers, our airmen, our Marines, our sailors. They paid for it with their lives. He said, quote, it's a quote now, "The monuments we raise to their heroism and sacrifice are really surrogates for the monuments we owe ourselves for our blindness to reality, for our unsubstantiated wishful thinking about how war could not come." And that's exactly what happened. It was true then, and it's true now. So to say these things can wait while the House goes on another recess, or to use them as a bargaining chip, or to forego them to instead wage war on our own president, it's at best a waste of time and resources, and at worst a dangerous abdication of the constitutional duty. Now, unfortunately, the truth is, if we kick the can down the road on these defense policy and funding bills, we're just adding another challenge to our defense. We were off to a great start last year. Defensive appropriations enacted on time for the first time in a decade. And as I say, we passed the NDAA over here the fastest that we've done it in 40 years. So all of the service leaders who came in before the Senate Armed Services Committee said that having an on-time appropriations and authorizations is critical to rebuilding the force. Now, we've got the National Defense Strategy in the Commission report as a roadmap. We've got a budget deal. There's no reason we can't get this done. There's no good reason my Democrat colleagues are dragging their feet. Our senior military leaders said that a continuing resolution is absolutely the worst thing that we can do. And by the way, a lot of people don't know what a continuing resolution is. If you pass a continuing resolution because you can't get appropriation bills passed, then you're just continuing what you did the previous year. Well, that doesn't work when you're carrying on a military, because the needs that we have in the coming year are not the same needs. We could have those programs already completed, and yet we would still have to fund them under a continuing resolution. That's kind of a separate issue, but it's one that is critically important today, and it's being considered today. So I'm surprised that the Democrats, and this is the Democrats in the House, not the Senate. The Senate Democrats and Republicans worked very well together. But I'm surprised that the Democrats in the House are willing to resort to a full-year CR. It's throwing in the towel. It's quitting when our troops need us the most. My Republican colleagues in the House, led by the House Armed Services Ranking Member Thornberry, put out this document that talks about how America's military would be damaged under a full CR. Now, no one's talked about this before. I'm glad he came out with it. And I'm going to mention the 5 things that he mentioned. It would extend the pilot shortage of our Air Force. Extend because we are still climbing out of the current shortage. Now, we do have a problem. We have a problem in the Air Force, and we have a problem every place that we're using flying equipment, whether it's fixed wing or otherwise. And this is a problem that is a serious problem. But if we were to somehow have to do a full year CR, that problem won't be solved. It would prevent military from managing its personnel, including necessary efforts to grow the force, pay the military moves, and lock in bonuses for our troops. They wouldn't happen if we end up with a one-year CR. It would force the Navy to cancel ship maintenance and training. Repairs for 14 ships would actually be canceled. It would worsen the existing munitions shortage by preventing DOD from buying more than 6,000 weapons. And finally, we'd fall even further behind our competitors on hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, next-generation equipment that we need to face all challenges that we just talked about. Now, hypersonic weapons, just as an example, I saw the other day for the first time. In fact, I used this picture. I brought it down to the Senate floor. A hypersonic weapon is kind of the weapon of the future. It's one that works at 5 to 10 times the speed of sound. It's a type of artillery, and it's a type of munition. And we were actually, prior to the last administration, that was the Obama administration, we were ahead of our peer competitors, which China and Russia. Now we're actually behind China and Russia. And that's how serious it is. You know, I talk to people in the real world. I go back to Oklahoma and I talk to people. And they assume that we in the United States have the very best of everything. We don't. We've allowed other countries, primarily China and Russia, to catch up with us and actually put us behind in some areas. And not to mention the waste of the taxpayer dollars. CR wastes billions of dollars creating repetitive work and injecting uncertainty in contracting process and the rushed work at year's end. It's something that it's totally unnecessary, and it's something that should not be happening. I've been meeting with my fellow conferees regularly, more than we ever have before during NDAA negotiations. I'm making sure we have a backup plan if we can't reach an agreement on the NDAA, but time's running out. Here's the reality. We've only got 20 legislative days left in the Senate, and the House has even less than that because of the recess week that they took. And if the House sends us articles of impeachment, that would eat up all the time in December, and it could spill into January. That would mean that we'd go beyond the deadline that our troops needed to be funded. And that is a reality that we've never had to face before. Now, we don't have time left. We need to make these bills a priority in the way we always have done before. The NDAA has passed for the last 58 years. It's the most important thing that we do each year. In June, the Senate bill passed 86 to 8. 86 to 8, that's a landslide. And that was right down not down party lines, that was on a bipartisan basis. And I'm grateful to the Senate Democrats for their partnership and their work in creating and passing this bipartisan bill. Jack Reed is my counterpart over there. He's the ranking member in the Senate Armed Services Committee, and we worked hand in glove throughout this process and even set records. So we did our job, and it's got to be completed in the House. And this happened in line with the best traditions of the Senate Armed Services Committee, a tradition that spans almost 6 decades. Usually, this is a bipartisan bill. Both sides give and take. So it concerns me to see partisan politics being inserted into this must-pass bill when we go to conference between the House and the Senate. It concerns me to see Democrats filibustering defense appropriations to prove a political point. It concerns me to see them prioritizing their misguided attempts to undo the results of the 2016 election through impeachment instead of taking care of our troops and with the NDAA. If we can't keep defense authorizations free, the partisan gridlock, what kind of a message does that send Americans who rely on our troops for protection? And our allies, they're out there too. They rely on us. So as I said before, the world is watching. We're sending a message, and we need to make that a successful message. And let me just say one more thing about the skinny bill. This is now a reality. And when I filed this, we thought the chances that we'd have to use it were just very, very remote. Now, if they should go through with this, the thing that they're threatening to do over on the House side, an impeachment process, people don't realize this. It's a simple vote of the majority if you want to impeach somebody. It's the second step that is significant, and that is if they would impeach, they don't have to have any evidence, any documentation, any problem at all. If they just want to get a majority of people to say, let's impeach the president, they can say, we'll impeach the president. But the problem there is that then it comes over to the Senate, and the Senate has to go through this long process, and that was what we'd be competing with when we were not getting the defense authorization bill done. So the skinny bill is important. It is now filed. It's ready to pass if we should have to do that. Nobody wants to do it, but we may end up having to do it. That's the good news and the bad news. This is the most important bill of the year. We need to get it passed.